Hey everyone, this is Alexis, host of The Adam Kiss Show, and today I will be speaking with actor, writer, director, singer, and independent filmmaker Adam Kiss. Today we will discuss a little bit about writing the film My Last Words, as well as directing one's own script. Feel free to comment and share. We would love to hear from you. And now, here's Adam.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone, and let's get right to it.
Yeah, of course. So let's start with asking you, how did you get into writing in the first place?
Absolutely. It's a very deep topic to start with, but I absolutely love it. Obviously, so going back, who knows when any story really starts? We all learn to write as kids, we learn to talk, and then we learn to write, as we go to school. We learn all those kind of things. And I mean, what is writing really? It's storytelling. And you start thinking that even before there was written writing, people would just tell stories, and that was kind of the writing. Even like the epic, those great epics like the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer. They say that those legends started really as in that oral tradition of storytelling, telling stories around the fire, really, and just over generations, telling these stories. And, you can consider people like that writers too, or really, we all are in our own way writers, which is a great thing. But in terms of how I specifically got into writing, I guess as a teenager, I really started to love literature. A lot of the great classics, Tolstoy, Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, all those great, Dostoevsky definitely, and all those great authors. And then just over time, I guess I wanted to write, in that kind of classic style. So I started writing, a bunch of like short stories, things like that as a kid, as a teenager. I eventually did write a novel as well. I know we'll probably get into that another time. Um, but in terms of getting into screenwriting, that was definitely never on my mind. I never, particularly as a kid, dreamed that I would be, in particular, a screenwriter or anything like that. If anything, I thought more on the novel side, or the written fiction side. And the truth is that writing a novel is totally different than writing a screenplay. That they're basically opposite. In a novel, you read it and you're describing everything, and you have to. It's your you have well the best way to put it is that in a novel you have complete control. With a script, you write it and then the director shoots it, and it could totally change, and it's a much more collaborative thing. And locations can change from what you considered, and that's why in a lot of scripts, you don't necessarily go into so much detail as you would in a novel, where you can set something, with 1,000 extras, whereas with a screenplay sometimes you have to think of material considerations like that. But basically, to finally get to your question, that was a very long-winded background from me, but to finally get to your question, I really started just a couple of years ago during the pandemic, in terms of screenwriting, really just to create my own content, create my own things. Yeah, it was in the last few years, definitely during the pandemic, I wrote my first script, and then I continued on to, I have about 7 or so right now. And this script that we just filmed right now for My Last Words was definitely a very special one. It was very special to me. As I mentioned last time, I actually started it on Christmas Day this last year, so Christmas Day 2022, and we ended up filming it about within 6 months later, which is crazy. It's a crazy timeline for a script. But I have so many others that I'm excited now to start work on getting them produced and everything. And yeah, in a very long-winded way, that's how I got into screenwriting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd like to, before I ask you the second question, I just have a personal question. That is, do you ever have you ever pictured yourself writing in the future, writing like instead of even a screenplay or even a novel, writing for a theater play? Because obviously, you've acted in many plays. Have you ever thought or considered doing that?
Absolutely, of course. Certain, for example, the screenplay that I just wrote, My Last Words, it could work as a play because it has few locations, few characters. Really, that's kind of the golden rule with playwriting. Few locations, few characters, keep it simple. There are plays that break those rules, but if you want to make your life easier, that's what you want to do when you're writing a play. No, I have definitely thought of it. I guess what it is that I got more into the filmmaking side. So it's I absolutely love the stage as well. It's just that so far I've been more in the filmmaking side, and I'd absolutely love to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So my second question then is, what are some of your favorite movie scripts or screenwriters?
Absolutely. Well, tough question, but I guess favorite movie scripts. I mean, let me start with one that's very much well known. It's very acclaimed. Would be the script for Chinatown by Robert Towne. Um, it's considered by many to be the greatest screenplay written, and I can see why. It has so many twists and turns, but it's a very smart script. It's an incredible movie, so that's an example of a great script that became a great movie. Because sometimes you can have a great script and it can be totally butchered or become a terrible movie, or you
Yes.
can have really a script that's not so good that actually ends up making a pretty good movie. Um,
Yeah.
so you can have all those different scenarios, but that was kind of a perfect storm where a great writer did a great script. It was a great director, great cast, everything to make a great movie. I mean, other than that, I love the script for Casablanca, obviously. Going full circle, that actually uh, they took that from a play, that screenplay. It was from an unproduced play at the time that they bought the script, and they just converted it to the screen and changed a lot of things as you do. But the
Yeah.
core story with the letters of transit and everything was the same. The play was originally called Everybody Comes to Rick's, actually. Um,
Okay.
yeah. So no, I
Great.
definitely love that. I love the script for Citizen Kane. That was co-written by Orson Welles as well, who starred and directed in it when he was about my age,
Yes. Yes.
which is crazy because if you see him in that movie, you'll see he definitely does not look like a guy in his 20s, and that's the power of the acting and the makeup and everything.
That.
I mean, he progresses at several points. He does play the young version of the character in that script as well, but he also plays the
Wow.
very old version of the character and everything. It's really interesting to see, and it's really a great script, very much ahead of its time in terms of it uses kind of a very modern kind of narrative device where it starts in the present day and then it goes back and things, and nowadays that's been way overdone, but in those days that was pretty revolutionary, and it was not really expected. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, I think that those are definitely three top in terms of scripts for the screenplays. Obviously, it's a very different way to judge a screenplay versus a work of literature. And they have different purposes. A work of literature, everything's there for you. Like, it's all spelled out for you. With a screenplay, so much is left up to interpretation.
Yes, yes, yes. So speaking of which, you're saying, about judging, the screenplays versus literature. How, like, what makes a good script? What do you think makes a good script? How do you judge whether or not a script is good, or, whether or not a script is good?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is art. There's no way to judge. It's
Yes,
it's so it's so based on people's opinion. I mean, that's the thing. People can have such different opinions about movies in general. It's not like we're in sports where whoever gets the ball in the hoop or in the goalpost wins.
yes,
And that's why it's very hard even with film festivals and everything. Because there is no best picture or best movie or best thriller or best this or that. It's really so there's really no way to judge that because everyone has their own opinion. What's good for someone will be terrible for someone else. Or, a movie that I may love and I say, hey, check this out to you. And then you take a look at it and you say, oh, yeah, no thanks, or vice versa. You may say, oh, have you seen this? I loved it so much. And then I'll take a look and say, yeah, not really my cup of tea.
yes.
Um, and that's just the way things are. And, why that is, who knows? But so basically, what I'm saying there, and this should actually be encouraging, is there's really no such thing as a bad script.
Yes,
Um,
yes, I love that.
I mean, I remember someone said, in line with that, I remember I heard an interview where some screenwriter, I forget exactly who it was, but they said, there's no such thing as a bad script, just an unfinished one. Meaning that, maybe it just needs a little tweaking, but basically, there's always something good in every script, I would say.
That's awesome. Yeah. And just like, reading your script, without, not giving anything away, I know, and I've mentioned this before, you're very, it's very, I would say, when I say artistic, I mean, that's, you can use that term a lot of different ways, but I think, you can tell, like I've said, you can tell like the kind of literature you've read based on how you've spoken. And like when you read people's scripts, I feel like nowadays, just reading other people's scripts, sometimes you see, like, for example, if I read a script that's supposed to be set back in, like, time, like maybe 1700s, they're using a lot of times more, what do you call it, more dialogue. Obviously they're a little bit more long-winded, but then you look at some of the modern scripts now, and they're very short, and very, very short. And I just wonder, like, I know you're saying, it's not something you can really judge. There's really no bad thing, but is there something that you kind of look for? Like, I mean, I know every character is supposed to talk a little differently, but do you kind of look at something like the types of words they use, or like how do you, like, what makes a script stand out to you, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask. Like, if you were to read a script, what would you say, like, oh, I see what they're trying to do, but like I would have worded it this way, especially as a writer. Like, how would you look at that?
Oh, I mean, that is so true. What you just said, that, oh, you're reading something and you say, oh, maybe I would have done this with it. I mean, it's actually, very hard for me to, read something or watch a movie these days, because then I start thinking, oh, I would have gone this way with the story, or, I would have done that. And then maybe it would have been more interesting, or something like that. Yeah, it's very hard not to do that. And also people know not to, that it's no fun watching movies with me, because I basically tell them the plot in the first 5 or 10 minutes. I say what's going to happen. And I think the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I think my mom literally just told me, "Oh, you should be a screenwriter, because you just figure out the plot in the first 5 minutes."
Oh,
And
hilarious.
it's so true, and that's why I love it when I'm surprised or something, by when, for example, if you make the obvious guess and then you realize, oh, they actually didn't end up doing that, which 99 of the 100 movies end up going the obvious route, and maybe one movie
Yeah.
does something interesting. I mean, I think obviously cliches are there for a reason, and they're great. A lot of them, a lot of those formulas are great. Again, a lot of great movies have been made like that. But then a lot of great movies have been made from deviating from that as well, which I think is great. And in terms of the other part of your question, like, what do I? Well, I remember you mentioned before that you see in a lot of scripts today that, like, there's a lot of action, very little dialogue, versus like in the old days there was a lot of dialogue and like very little description. That's definitely the new trend in the world today. Um,
Yeah.
I should say that, for me, I'm guilty as charged. My characters talk a lot, so I have
Yeah.
I definitely believe in a lot of dialogue. In that
Yeah.
way, I do write a little bit more like a playwright than a
Yeah.
screenwriter. A lot of people have. I mean, one modern example who does that still is Tarantino. Of course, he writes in a completely different style than me. It's like
Yeah.
180, 100% different. The only similarity really is that his characters also talk a lot. I know Aaron Sorkin is another one, same thing. But I mean, other than that, the trend is definitely towards little dialogue, mostly just, action. And I kind of miss a lot of the dialogue, the interaction between characters, versus just focusing on, a bunch of action. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I love how you do that, because, like I'm saying, whenever I was looking through some of these scripts, sometimes it's really hard to kind of tell the characters. They're so focused on the action. When they're building a relationship, they end up to build a relationship. They a lot of times will put a dialogue and use kind of like a saying that you've heard before, and so it kind of sounds cheap, where it sounds like overused, and it's like, so I love how you do word it differently, especially with the literature background. I love that.
and
Because you can.
absolutely, and absolutely, like, in terms of, you have to have different voices for each character. That's super important. It's obviously not everyone talks the exact same way. So some
Yes.
people talk more, some people talk less. That's part of the character, and then the way they talk is also different. So you obviously have to differentiate that. It's not one size fits all, which is another important thing. Like, each character, I mean, unless they're literally all supposed to be the same, they shouldn't
Yeah.
be talking
Yeah.
exactly the same, unless that's the point of the story.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I love that. Yeah, so I'd like to ask you now a little bit about kind of move on, transition from writing to acting, and what was it like? I guess if you could kind of describe to us what it was like to act out your own dialogue. Did that make it easier? I know we talked a little bit about like learning the script, and I remember when we had when I was interviewing you and your mom, you're talking about how it was pretty natural, you talking to each other, but you still had to learn script, and obviously you wrote the script, so I'm assuming you had an idea of what to say, but like, memorizing it, all that kind of, you played, I mean, you were in every scene, as far as I remember, you were in every scene. So yeah, like, was that hard to do? I mean, was it hard? Did you get sick of your dialogue ever, like anything like that just from seeing it? How was that?
It's funny that you asked that. Yeah, nobody thinks of that. I mean, I guess everybody would think that because I wrote it, oh, I must just know it immediately, and it's no big deal, and it's so easy. Well, not the case. Just because you wrote it once, along, a few months back or something, doesn't mean that you all of a sudden happen to know it. I mean,
Yes.
in a way, because it's in my style or my voice. I mean,
Yeah.
as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, almost saying it out loud. I'm thinking it. So, I mean, in a way, it was easy for me to articulate the words because I felt that, that they fit the character and that they felt fit exactly what I was going for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still had to go and learn it just like any other script. I mean, yeah, that's the joke that like if someone else sends you a script or something, you have to, really go over it and stuff to the word. And if it's your own script, you think, oh, well, maybe I can, I can replace that word or something,
Yeah.
sometimes. I didn't have to worry about, upsetting, the screenwriter or the director or anything because I'm the director and the screenwriter.
Yes.
So I could make an executive decision right on the spot about that. But yeah, I really I enjoyed the process. It was kind of surreal, honestly. Doing a feature film and saying the words and acting out the scenes that kind of just came from some place inside my mind, and suddenly, we're on set with 17 other people, making it happen. Um, and yeah, I mean, in terms of, we talked about rehearsing with my mom a little bit. I also rehearsed, with the other actresses, extensively beforehand. I definitely believe in rehearsing beforehand. Some don't. Maybe that's the theater background in me.
Okay.
But
Yes.
yeah, definitely, I believe in, because I mean, it's all about repetition. That's really, what acting is about. You have to really learn the material, learn the lines to really be comfortable with it. I mean, I know there's the story of Anthony Hopkins. I think what he said is that he reads every single script, even if it's a film script, that he's going to do exactly 250 times before he starts. And that's his little quirk. He says it has to be exactly 250 times. But another person who's like that, probably not to that extent, would be Al Pacino. I know he's very much into, repeating and repeating and repeating. And yeah, I mean, it's really no exception. You just have to keep going over it, even if you wrote it, um, because this was not like an improv thing. Everything was scripted. There wasn't really improv. I mean, here and there, I would go off the rails a little bit. Or, for example, there was this one area of the script where only I'm talking, for like a couple of pages.
Yes.
And there, just to try interesting things. I think I tried one, closer to script, and then I kind of said, okay, we've got that. So I'm just going to try a few kind of going off the rails, trying some new things. But that's different also because I was the only one talking. It was kind of that kind of a scenario. So I definitely love to experiment when I can. But
Yes.
yeah, other than that, it was great doing my own script.
So just out of curiosity, how many times do you think um like you had to, redo the scene? Like how, like what was the typical, like, is there like, is that like, is there a common, like, was there a certain scene that you just had to, keep redoing, or is there a general like, number of times that you have to do it to get it right? Or how was that for you?
Sure. Well, it depends. I mean, obviously, there's way different ways of doing it. There's people like Stanley Kubrick who they do like hundreds of takes, sometimes. Uh,
Yes.
I mean, the joke with him was, he would do like 150, 200 takes sometimes, which is
Yes.
crazy. On the other hand, you have people like Clint Eastwood who just, tries to do a couple of takes. I think his motto is to get two good takes and then move on. Um, but yeah, I mean, in terms of myself, I like to think that maybe I'm kind of a happy medium between that. I mean, I would say on the lower end. I could like to consider myself, an actor's director. Um, in terms of, I'm an actor myself, so I see things through an actor's perspective. And I know that, doing something 150 times, there's a moment where you're not really going to improve things. Um,
Yeah.
or, I mean, I know what Kubrick was going for, for example, in movies like The Shining, when he was doing that, is he was literally trying to get that, where the characters are almost going insane in that particular movie, which it fit there. But
Yes, yes.
for us, I mean, I try not to go overboard, not to do too many. It really, so in a typical scene, I mean, certain scenes would be more, certain would be less, but I mean, we're talking about shots. So, for example, for each particular shot, we would probably do anywhere between 2 and 4 takes for that particular shot, and then move on to do the reverse shot.
Yeah.
Again, sometimes, if we were doing a master, sometimes we just had to do one and we knew we had it. And then, sometimes we had to do a couple of more, but that's roughly what it was like.
Yes, no, and I didn't really, make it clear. I know we kind of talked about this, I think, I don't know if it was last time or the time before, and you talking about the happy medium. I guess what I was trying to ask, like, did you like, like, I guess I think about this because I'm not an actor, so I see myself just what I've done like with friends. Um, I mean, like, did you like trip up and like how often did you like trip up on words? Or is that like not like I mean, I know you've been acting for a while, so was that not like a common thing? Like you had not retaking shots in the sense of let's try a different angle, but like, oh, I just like I said the wrong word, like that kind of thing. Like, did that happen often or like from any of you guys, or was that pretty much like, or is that the same thing with the takes? Like where you completely, for example, you say something and you completely like go off like you're like okay I've got to redo that for sure. Was that like something that was common? Because I know that happens to me and my sister all the time, but again we're not actors, so I'm asking you kind of from that I guess perspective. Is that a common thing for you or for any of your other characters?
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, I mean, mistakes happen all the time. That's why they have take two, I guess. But I mean, in terms of me, I mean, I don't think that really happened. If I made a mistake or something, my motto is just keep going because you never know. A lot of times, the most natural moments are the unplanned ones. So you never know, like if there was a
Yes.
mistake or something. I mean, so many classics that we've seen, I'm sure we don't even know, like there were certain mistakes or something, and it ended up happening. I mean, I know that, for example, in a very popular movie, which most people listening have probably seen, Pretty Woman, the movie. When he closes like the case on her hand, that was totally unscripted. That was a natural reaction. Same thing in Roman Holiday. When Gregory Peck is putting his hand in the mouth of truth, and he's like suddenly panics. Oh, it has my hand. That was all unscripted. It's those were in both cases for Audrey Hepburn and Julia Roberts. That was their natural reaction, which is kind of funny.
Oh,
Um, yeah, they were actually, surprised. So I mean,
that,
if you can get those kind of moments, great. I say, and yeah, I mean, obviously there were mistakes or line flubs. We had to start over. It's not a big deal. It happens. I mean,
okay.
in terms of me though, I generally just try to keep steamrolling ahead. I don't like to stop a scene
Okay,
for
okay,
anything. I like to keep going, unless they shout, "Oh, okay, the boom's in." Okay, yeah, then we should probably restart. Or things like that.
okay, okay. Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I guess I when I think about dialogue, I always think that's the hardest part. And just because I know from what we've done, it's just so many times it was retakes just because of not just because of like style purposes, but like just completely going off like what's my the old the joke, what's my line? I don't remember what it is.
Yeah.
And
What's my
obviously that's
line
coming
anyway? Yeah.
obviously that's coming from someone who doesn't act, so it is different. But yeah, and I guess I'd like to kind of end the session on one last question, and that is, what was it like directing your own script?
Absolutely. Well, that was the best part. And originally, I mentioned that I also, in a previous interview that we did, I believe it was our very first episode where I mentioned that I never dreamed of being a director. That was never really on my radar. I was always, more dreaming of being a performer. Maybe, more writing when I was a kid, but being a film director, it was never really on my radar. I definitely was always interested in films. I was interested in acting in films, but in terms of directing them, it really just came up recently. And even when I wrote this script and I started to think, okay, I have to produce this now, and I started to think, so I guess I should get a director to direct it. And then I
Yeah.
started to think, well, wait a minute, nobody's going to understand exactly what I meant, my whole vision here. I mean, nobody knows the script better than I do.
Yes.
And that's why I really believe in the whole concept of writer directors, writer/directors.
Yeah.
I think that they're much more rare than they should be. I know that there are so many directors out there who maybe do a little bit of writing or they work with a writer, but there's very few directors that actually, write their script alone or at least co-write it and then, direct it. So that's an entirely different class. And then it's so much more like a film in that case, when the director has also written it, it's really more of a personal
Yeah.
piece. It's like as much as a painting or something. Whereas if it's a different writer, a different director, it may have kind of a wishy-washy vision a bit. But yeah, I mean, I guess it was in a way easy to direct it because I knew exactly what I envisioned. And then it's just about, directing is not about doing everything. You can't do everything yourself. Really, just to be a director, you just have to be a good communicator to
Yeah.
communicate vision to everyone else. Um,
Yeah.
but if you can't, communicate with other people, then I mean that's really the most important thing about being a director, is being
Yeah.
able to communicate in a way that people understand you, and also you have to be kind of, a diplomat between everyone, and
Yeah.
also I had a bunch of help with that as well. But also, you have to be able to just talk to different people in different ways. A lot of people, learn or absorb things in different ways. You have to be sensitive to that. Like the
Yes.
cinematographer, you talk to the cinematographer different than you may talk to one of the actors, or
Yes.
different, you may talk to one of the PAs. And I don't mean talk to them differently in any other way, just that, everyone works a little bit different. You have to get a sense for that.
Yeah, different personality. You have to have high emotional intelligence. Just since we have time, I just kind of curious, you said, it's not very common for there to be a lot of writer and directors. Why do you think that is?
Oh, it's because it's difficult. There's no other way to put it. I mean, again, if something is easy, then everybody does it. And
That's true.
yeah, I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of work to do both. Then you double the time that you're involved in the project, and maybe
That's
you
true.
take less things. Whereas if you are not a writer director, you can direct, 3 movies a year, um, maybe two. I don't know, but probably at least in terms of mainstream films, you'd be going at a slower pace if you're a writer and director. But
Oh,
yeah, I believe that there should be more. I mean, it's something that I believe strong. I almost believe strongly that writers should direct the movie. I mean, if they can. I
yeah.
mean, it's otherwise the script, it can go a totally different way, and not to say that things can't be improved on, or I mean, I'm sure that there are certain scripts that were very much improved on the way they were just directed or shot. And I'm sure,
Yeah.
vice versa, there's great scripts that were absolutely butchered. Just to go full circle back to your first question today.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I know. I think that's really interesting. I'm glad to hear you say that because I guess whenever I think about that, I think for a lot of writers, I think it would be so hard to be a writer and to see your script. If it's so, maybe it's not important, but I feel like for most people, if they've written it, it's going to be important to them. They want that vision to come, and it's like nobody's going to see it the way you originally did if you're the
Yeah,
writer, you're the creator. So, yeah, that was awesome. Yeah, I
yeah.
appreciate it.
I
Um,
basically, I just knew that, you know, nobody exactly, like nobody would understand exactly what I was going for. And if I didn't direct it, I just knew that nobody would get it. That the movie wouldn't get made the way I thought it should get made.
yes, yes, with your particular style, taste, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's all we have time for today. So before we go though, I'd like to list again, as usual, all of Atticus's social media platforms. I'll start with Instagram. He has three. First one is at Adam Kiss Productions. The next one at adamkiss.official, and the third one at My Last Words Movie. We also have, and I do not have the paper right now. Here it is. His TikTok is at Adam Kiss Official, and Facebook and YouTube at Adam Kiss Official. That's where you'll find this video uploaded, and Twitter at Real Adam Kiss. You can also find Adam on IMDb or at his website, adamkissofficial.com. So yeah, that's all we have time for. Thank you again, Adam, for discussing your project. I look forward to talking with you next week on a different project. And yeah, to the listeners, to all who are listening, be sure to follow us and get notified when the next episode is released. We actually filmed 2 last week, so we should have one coming this coming Monday. And pretty soon we'll also have another podcaster hopefully on interviewing as well. So be on the lookout for him or her. And yeah, thank you again, Adam. Have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everyone.